All right, we'll get started. So this is Town Council meeting 26-25. Today is Tuesday, December 16th, 2025. It is 6:05 p.m. and we are in Town Council chambers. Our first order of business is to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, and we'll go ahead and take roll call, see who is here. Councillor Pillsbury.
Present.
Councillor Sparta.
Here.
Councillor Lawrence.
Here.
Councillor Brown.
Here.
Councillor Smith.
Present.
Councillor Benoit is here and present. Councillor Pilch will be a few minutes late. Our third order of business is to waive the reading and accept as printed the December 2nd, 2025 meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All right. All those in favor?
Aye.
Moving on to our announcements. The award for Freeport Citizen of the Year is given annually to a Freeport individual or community group that has contributed to the quality of town, the well-being of citizens, and the reputation of Freeport, and that has caused measurable improvement in the circumstances of a significant number of townspeople. The name of the honored recipient or group will be permanently displayed on a plaque located in Town Hall so that all may remember their service and contributions. The deadline for submission is December 31st, 2025, and we have not received any nominations.
We have now, I'm sorry.
Oh, we have two. Okay, scratch that. As of today, we have two nominations. 2026 dog licenses are due by December 31st. Don't forget this gift to your canine family. The Exit 20 and Exit 22 bridges, the replacement and multi-use path projects, they are complete. The rebuilding project included adding multi-use pathways along with sidewalks so pedestrians and bicyclists can safely and efficiently make their way from one side of town to the other, strengthening communities and businesses on both sides of the highway. This project also ties in nicely with the Village Corridor Initiative, opening doors for future growth. To learn more, people can watch a town-produced video featuring key players on our website at freeportmaine.com. Any other announcements from councilors?
Can I ask a question on that?
Sure.
And the answer may not be known. Are the lights dialed in to where they're at? Are we still working on that?
We have our Public Works Director here, but I'm going to try to speak for him and say that we've had contact with MDOT. They are continuing to work with their traffic engineering staff to dial the lights in. We've had complaints. This is something that we've made known. They're working on it. We just can't move it faster.
Any other announcements or questions? Okay, we will move on to information exchange. This is just time for counselors to share any conversations or committee meetings they've had since our last meeting that's worth sharing. All right. That means we'll move on to our manager's report. So we did do something a little different this week. We've been getting feedback, and I agree that we've been spending a lot of time in the beginning of our meetings having a really good conversation about information that the manager shares. To try and get ahead of that and to save time for good conversation later on in the meeting, Sophie has included her written report with the materials. So this is going to be, unless we get feedback, how we move forward with the manager's report. So we'll start off, see if Sophie has anything she'd like to add to the written report, and then we'll move on to questions.
So I do want to first correct an item in the written report under Memorial Park where I talked about the pavilion. This is corrected in the material online and what was printed for the public, but that is, the pavilion, the money that was appropriated for the pavilion was actually capital funds, not ARPA funds. So Jessica, we looked at that. And then the next thing is I briefly mentioned that we have a new Deputy Public Works Director, but I want to introduce him officially. Matt Labascus comes to us from Bath. He has an extensive background in the trades, carpentry, masonry, mechanic, plumbing, HVAC, and business. He's been operations director, managing facilities, supervising people. He's got a pretty extensive technical background. I will tell you what impressed me the most in our interviews was how he connected with people, his belief in what customer service is and the municipal role. So we're really excited to have him. He started yesterday. So I thought the first thing we should do is introduce him to council. This is Matt.
Welcome, this is great.
So Matt and Earl are working through how to gently separate all of the duties on Earl's plate with Earl keeping a good span of control so he knows what's going on. Already, we've addressed vermin who are damaging our roads, and it's been nice to watch them work together in the whopping 2 days.
Welcome officially. We're very happy to have you. With that, any other questions from Sophie or for Sophie? Go ahead, Councilor Brown.
I had a question about the CDBG joint application, which we've been exposed to because of the daycare center, I think, earlier in the season. We're supporting the grant, but is there money involved?
No, so this first step is actually agreeing to allow us to be part of the team or supporting team for a letter of intent to apply. We would be offering to do promotion for them in terms of making sure our residents understand that the service would be there, and general support for the program. There is no there is no matching funds required for this. So Cumberland County runs the CDBG program, Community Development Block Grant Program, for all of the municipalities in the region. There are two different ways municipalities can apply for various pots of money. One is as a sole applicant, which you're limited to one application. Otherwise, if you decide you want to participate with a regional effort, then you can support a regional effort without it counting against your ability to make an application. So this would be the third joint application in the last 2 years with Westbrook. Two of them, Westbrook has been the lead. There was a housing opportunity to fund a navigator for folks who were experiencing homelessness or housing issues. One was our community development block grant for the daycare for business assistance, and then this one. And we tend to pair up because of the way our CDBG qualifications rank. So that's why the partnership has kind of evolved over time.
Sounds smart.
Other questions for the manager?
Not exactly a question, just following up on a couple of things you mentioned at the end of the report related to the multi-use paths and the bridges, particularly with exit 22. I know this came up at Complete Streets, this back and forth about whether or not to clear the snow off of the trail or the multi-use path on the bridge. And I think this is just something we're hearing constituent concerns about on a regular basis, is the concern about saying that the bridge and the path for that segment is done, and yet the safety of the fact that it doesn't actually connect yet on either side, really. And I think I just want to point out that we're doing our best, not necessarily to encourage people to use that path, because it does not yet connect to anything, but for people that are choosing to use it, to keep them as safe as possible. So we're still very much, while that part of the project is done, the whole path is not done, and it will still take some time to get there. So there are still significant safety concerns about that, but I think we are handling that as best we can.
Can I add to that? Another safety concern about the bridges and the sidewalks in particular. I was told today that there was a car driving on the sidewalk on the bridge at exit 20 going the wrong way. So I assume you're aware of the things we can do to prevent that.
What is interesting is that's not the first time that's happened, and we have had the conversation with MDOT about that.
And there's things they can do to prevent that or discourage that.
It's like a little thing.
We actually are trying to get
The penalty for offering to speak is you have to make the journey over to the podium.
We've actually reached out to MDOT and asked them to, we don't want bollards in the middle of them because it's not going to get through, but put do not enter signs on each one of those ramps, so hopefully they won't get on the bike path. Second time this week that's happened.
Can we just put a sign that says bike path, or instead of?
I would do that.
not enter, only because I could see
Yeah, just-
someone like, wait, am I not supposed to use this, or?
Well, that is one of MDOT's concerns. They put do not enter. If the bicycle goes on there, they probably wouldn't do it. I think somebody walking would probably get on there, but not somebody on the bike.
Right, well, I'm just, the do not enter sign, I don't think is the right
Correct.
one.
Is it intentional or unintentional?
I think it's unintentional from what I've heard, at least today's
The-
incident. Appeared to be unintentional.
So do they make a turn off of the exit to get on there? That's the only way I can see him doing that.
That's still a heck of a turn.
Yeah.
Well, it's the same 90-degree turn, it's just a little sooner than.
Would the bollards get in the way of the snow plows? Is that why you don't want the bollards? Or
Talking with the planner, I think DOT would not put bollards there.
No, they were, that was something they weren't, and they didn't want to discuss putting bollards up on there. Now, I will say, there is some confusion, because I've got a couple of phone calls today. There is a vehicle that pulls in there and parks, and that is the guy that's monitoring the traffic to help. Somebody had asked about tuning the signals in a little bit. That's what he's doing there, is trying to get the signals to work a little bit better. I've had one say, well, he's just driving on that instead of the road. No, he's actually working on it.
Was he there when this happened?
The one that Mr. Dan's talking about, I didn't witness. I witnessed the one last week, and it was
Was he
somebody.
parked there? I wonder if that.
No,
might
it
be
was
the
somebody
confusion.
that was aggravated. Traffic was backed up and went around.
Oh,
So, the only other thing I would say is I just want to call out that I did bring to your attention the concerns about dogs running off leash. I said I was going to do that. I want to make sure in case the person didn't read the report. And the other thing is more of a point of interest for counselors is I talked about two concerns that had been raised. One was property tax affordability, and the other was around multi-use paths and off-road trails. I think what was a little jarring or interesting for me in those two conversations is that they happened during manager drop-in hours. So I had the first half hour of manager drop-in hours talking about how we needed to reduce the cost of property taxes. And then it was immediately followed by, we need to do more faster with trails. And both of these points of view and perspectives are things that we hear, I think, pretty routinely. But I do think it highlights kind of the stress that is on the town council when trying to find that balance. So I just wanted to, even though they were at the beginning and end of the report, they actually happened within minutes of each other.
All right, thank you, Sophie. All right, well, with that, we will move on to our new business portion of the agenda. So item 152-25 is our consent agenda. Oh, I missed public comment. Not on purpose, I swear. It's tucked at the bottom, and I crossed it off already. So we'll open public comment. This is the first portion for folks who are here in person who would like to speak. I just ask that you introduce yourself and keep your time to 3 minutes or less.
We're tag teaming this evening. I'm Daryl Fournier from Fournier Drive in Freeport.
Joyce Vayu from Island View.
So together, we're here to ask for permission to host a 9/11 ceremony coming up this September 11th, which will be 25 years, hard to believe. And Joyce did the past 9/11 memorial 20 years ago, so she graciously, after I called her, said that she'll come up and help out. So we have started the process. We are well underway. We have pipes and drums lined up that will come. I'll speak on my portion, and Joyce will tell you what she's doing. I've got ladder trucks lined up to come. We are not going to shut down Main Street, however, like we did 5 years ago. We'll be putting the ladder trucks on West Street. We want to close West Street from about 8:15 to 9:30. We'll have the traffic go the other way, and all the traffic on Main Street will be going straight through. The other challenge we had in the 20-year anniversary, we brought high school students down. They will be coming again this year. And we really had a congestion with vehicles coming up West Street, and it was kind of a safety problem. By shutting that down, the kids will be able to come onto West Street and be next to the memorial as the event unfolds and really get them to participate, which I think is very important. Joyce?
I'm supporting whatever Daryl doesn't do. No, but I think it's very important that we continue our 5-year tradition and that the town have this as a town event, and help us with advertising it on the town calendar and the fall newsletter and any other newsletters that go out. But to have the high school kids involved so that many of them, they weren't even alive when it happened. And so this is the only way they find out what that was. So it's all local people that will be involved in the program itself. And so we hope for your vote tonight, or a nod, straw poll, whatever you wish to call it, that you will pick it up as a town event.
You are talking about cost. We're not looking at any cost. So what we'll be looking at is the big issue, and I'm hopefully Sophie will handle that issue on insurances, but I think there's a way to cover us on that. The Lioness are going to be hosting, after the event, snacks or whatever at the station, so they're picking all that up. Freeport Fire Company is picking up some costs for some items that will be handed out. I'm not going to say what those are. They're going to be a secret. And then I'm working on a speaker from New York City, and he'll be, the first one fell through. I hope I can make that happen. If not, but the fire company has also asked that they could pick up the cost if someone comes up from the city. So I hope we get someone. So as you're getting ready for budget season, I remember budget season well, so that won't be an issue.
I think this is a great idea and important for us to do. One thing that I'm curious about is police detail and safety in that aspect of it. Yeah.
So it's my understanding that Daryl has talked extensively with Chief Goodman, and that this is something that he fully supports. By doing it from I have 8:30 to 9:15, I think, or 8:15.
Probably 8:15 to 9:30. Yep.
9:15. It allows us to take advantage of administrative staff who would otherwise be here. I know that this is something that our first responders are pretty attached to. It makes sense from a variety of reasons that we make this a town event. It allows us, we have volunteers who are trying to accomplish this, so it allows, if it's a town event and done with some coordination with the town, we can cover it under our insurance and promote it and do all sorts of great things. So I think this is something that we would be happy to take on.
Our police department is also providing the color guard and the salute. Yeah.
We've been having some conversations recently as well about use of town property and where we allow people to apply to use town property versus where the town invites something to happen. And I think particularly that we have a lot of areas that we call Memorial Park, but that particular Memorial Park on the corner of West and Main, I think is particularly a place where we would only want town events, where the town invites events to happen there rather than people applying to use that. So I think that, among other reasons, is a key reason for this to be a town event.
Just pointing out that it's on a Friday in terms of staffing, so.
So that's something that we would staff around, meaning bringing some of the salaried people back. We would just probably flip their week around or something to that effect.
It's a no-brainer. I just want to thank you both for taking the time and the foresight of doing this and making it happen.
Well, thank you for your support. I think it's really important.
Absolutely.
And I know I'm a little biased, but we got one of the best memorials in the state.
Amazing that you're this far ahead into the planning, too.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Hi, I'm Joyce Bayou with the American Legion. 2 for 1 tonight. I've had an offer of a donation of 50 12-inch wreaths. They are real, not plastic, to be placed at the veteran stones within the town cemeteries. So that would be not the big ones, not Burr, not West Street, not South Freeport, Webster. That would be the small ancient town cemeteries. Just wanted to see if I needed a vote in order to do that, a nod, a straw poll, or just go ahead and do it.
I see that as operational, I think. Yeah, I think.
Legion will put them out, Legion will pick them up.
Yeah, I think Sophie, you can work with Joyce to.
I think Earl
And
can
Earl.
work with Joyce, but I'm always
Sophie
happy
can
to
direct
work.
Earl.
But I think it's more efficient to go right to the.
I think
person
we've
who
got
can
it
make
covered,
happen.
so Earl's off the list this time, next year.
Great.
All
Thank
right,
you.
we'll make it happen.
My name is Daniel Freund, and now we get a clock, okay. Season's greetings to the council, the town manager, and all Freeport residents. I live at Cheok Road in Freeport. At each meeting and in correspondence, I invited dialogue and offered assistance to help the council reduce significant tax expenditures that are purchasing excessively expensive health insurance. I am still available. Over the past several years, I've studied the Maine Employees Association Benefits Trust, MEABT, which insures RSU5, and the Maine Municipal Employee Health Trust, MEHT, the organization that provides health insurance for town employees. Both share similar circumstances, with Anthem as the health insurance provider. I consistently urge the council to request medical claims data to expose excessive costs. Actuarial experts believe claim costs are at least 20% higher than necessary for identical plans with identical providers. This review is at no cost and no risk to the town. Recently, I noted in MMEHT's 2024 Form 5500, it showed $7.5 million spent on benefit administration, another example of excessive cost. So I ask, can the town manager or any counselor provide any written evidence of fiduciary oversight in the past decade? Secondly, has any RFP conducted by the trust ever been reviewed or questioned? And third, has any expenditure by MMEHT ever been scrutinized? The trust document, amended January 14th, 2002, Article 5, Section E, states trustees shall, quote, keep true and accurate records of account and records of their transactions as trustees and make such reports to members as may reasonably be required. Freeport's finance director is also a trustee of MMEHT. Has the manager or council requested the RFP information from her? What steps has the town finance director taken to ensure fiduciary oversight on behalf of Freeport? As a citizen, I respectfully request evidence of any fiduciary oversight from anyone at any time in Freeport government, councilors, town manager, or finance director, and that can be sent to me by email. 70% of the town's budget is for RSU 5. If we solve MMEHT, we solve MEABT. And in closing, I just want to mention that since 2023, over $6 billion has been fined and settled by Blue Cross throughout the United States. Most recently, the state of New Jersey paid a $100 million fine for, quote, knowingly overcharging state public employees' health plans. I'm available to help in any way. Thank you very much, and season's greetings.
All right, is there anybody else who would like to speak for public comment? The rest is staff. Okay. Now we will move on to the next portion of our agenda. So moving on to our consent agenda. This includes a couple of resignations and appointments and donations to the library. Anything to discuss on the consent agenda? All right, Councilor Pillsbury, could you please read the be it ordered?
Sure. Be it ordered that the December 16th, 2025 consent agenda be adopted.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Great.
Can I just make a note on that? Since it's resignations and appointments, we'd mentioned at one of our last appointments meeting, the topic of potentially having like non-voting associate members to help create a bench for vacancies. We're seeing, thanks to the municipal government series that the community programs is putting on, we're seeing a lot of applications for folks, and we actually had the unique circumstance where we had more applicants for open positions than we did open positions. So we'd like to use this time to create sort of a bench of folks, allow good work to happen, because all this is volunteer and, many hands. So just throwing that idea out there. It's one that the committee came up with, and love to get everyone's thoughts as to yay or nay, and if we need to do more discovery on it, but just initial thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's a great idea. There needs to be some way we can try and capture this surge of excitement about getting involved in town. And I think this will potentially help with those times we don't have an abundance of applicants, if we have sort of a pipeline of folks who can step into voting positions. So I know I'd be very excited about the possibility of that.
I'm wondering if an appropriate step forward would be to schedule this for other business in January, with staff bringing back boilerplate language to see if that meets your need. This is something that many other communities do. It talks about, because you're going to need to likely put this into ordinance, where you clearly define all the different committees. So just a thought.
I think that's a great direction. I would love to hear other councilors' thoughts if that's something we'd like to explore.
I'll chime in. I'll chime in. I think the more people we can get involved in this town, the better off we are. And another thing that other towns do is they involve their student bodies in these same committees. just on an internship basis. And I'd like to encourage that as well.
Yeah, it's a great idea. I know we have at least 2 on the police advisory committee, but that's definitely worth looking at for others as well. Yeah.
Both those student seats are still open. It's hard to find students who have the time, willingness to serve, but we've had some really great students in the past, so.
I'm willing to stand out in front of their parking because I'm doing that on a regular basis anyways to lessen some of the language that comes out of cars as they're frustrated trying to get into the parking lot and exit. So I'd be happy to talk to some of those students. And for that matter, I can make it a requirement of students who want to work at Freeport Oyster Bar. So we can make that happen.
Chris, do you have a contact at the school that we could?
I do.
Okay. Also, I mean, we could talk to the chair of the RSU5 board as well, see if there's any inroads they could suggest.
And while we're working this through ordinance, if we're going to put an ordinance in, you guys are interviewing these people, right? So if they're interested, why don't we ask them to just come to a meeting? Because I know when we're doing the committee meetings, we're always asking people to put in, and they're not allowed to vote, but they're, so kind of codifying things we can already do without having to go through the whole rigmarole of having an ordinance.
So it sounds like other business makes sense for further discussion. Great. Thanks for bringing that up, Councilor Pillsbury. Okay. Moving on to our next item, 153-25. This is to consider action relative to the purchase of Scott Air Packs. This is a public hearing. I'll let Chief remind us and give us an update on
Good
e-
our
evening.
conversation last time.
We had a meeting 2 weeks ago, and we had discussion about the Scott Air Packs. What we are going to do at this point with what was brought up about the trade-in equipment is essentially we're going to, with the guidance of the town manager, sought out counsel from MMA, and essentially what we'll do is we're allowed to sell the bottles. The packs really have no value, I think, as you can see from that information that we had in the last meeting. The bottles themselves, I believe as of today, if approved this evening, I have 17 of the 20 sold privately. So we just will write a letter just basically saying that the town of Freeport has essentially no responsibility after we turn the equipment over to the new department. And I believe it's recommended that we go with Fire Tech and Safety as the lower of the 2 bids in that case.
Thank you for very quickly turning that around and getting that information. Yeah. Any questions for Chief? Great, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
So this is a public hearing, so with that, I will open the public hearing. Anybody online who would like to speak?
No staff online.
All right, and we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. All right, any other discussion? All right, Councilor Sparta, could you please read the be it ordained?
Be it ordained that the bid to purchase Scott Air Packs in an amount not to exceed $145,100 be awarded to Fire Tech and Safety with funds drawn from capital funds previously approved for this purpose.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item 154-25. This is follow-up on our other business conversation where we started to consider giving some feedback to Brett. We're bringing it back for a little bit more of a discussion and presentation today for the Village Quarter Initiative summer demo projects. So while Brett's getting set up, a reminder that included basically looking for direction. Staff is looking for direction on what we'll do this summer in terms of demonstrations, if we'll reconsider doing a Phase 2 for Bow Street. We'll look to Main and Elm and School Streets, and the Mallet Drive light as well.
I don't know if Tom can see that we're having some technical issues that could really use his assistance.
Expertise.
Let me try to flip share back again, see if that. You want me just to take it from here, Brett?
Oh, here he is. You got him.
I can get started while Tom's working on that. So thanks for the opportunity tonight. Brett Richardson, Development Director with the town. And we're here to talk a little bit about next steps for the Village Corridor Initiative. And in particular, some recommendations from staff about projects for spring, summer of 2026, based on the conversation we had here at the council on December 2nd, as well as feedback from various stakeholders around the community. So we'll recall.
Hopeful pause.
The Village Corridor Initiative really comes out of a large body of work that the municipality, volunteers, boards, committees put together over the last 5, even 10 years, in particular the downtown vision. So the downtown vision started in, I think, 2020 or so and wrapped up in 2022. 800 folks participated, provided input, and came to a strong consensus around how to address some changes in the downtown area that folks weren't too excited about. There you go, Tom. If we put it on the... Start, there you go. All right. Thanks, Tom. So this thing's not working now? No. Thanks for your patience, appreciate it. You go to the next one. So tonight we're going to talk about the timeline, upcoming project milestones, and kind of remind folks of some really exciting things coming our way in the next month or so. We're going to recap the planning and design options for downtown that we talked about on the 2nd, and then we're going to offer a staff recommendation for what the staff collectively feels makes sense. I'm the spokesman, but this is a big team effort. Tom, next one. So to recap, like I was just saying a minute ago, this Village Corridor Initiative is really an implementation step for a lot of work that's gone in. Downtown Vision most recently, as well as the Climate Action Plan, the Comprehensive Plan, and then the Dog Bone Transit-Oriented Development Work Group. That represents, hundreds of hours of volunteer work, hundreds of data points from residents about what they would like to see for the future of their downtown, and a lot of technical assistance from experts and consultants. So we're here moving from planning really towards funding, design, and construction. We're going to create a vision that allows us to do designs and then rework and build the community's vision along the Route 1 corridor. One more, Tom. Next one. And then just to reiterate, the downtown vision, if you look at the Village Corridor Initiative, a lot of the goals came out of the downtown vision. A New England Village Center. So we're looking at land use as well as transportation through the Village Corridor Initiative. We'll talk soon about upcoming milestones, but on the 14th of January, we're going to have a workshop at Freeport Community Services. Public is welcome to come learn about what the consultants have analyzed for development opportunities on the land along the Route 1 corridor. So housing, a village that works for everybody, walkable and bikeable. That's a big priority for the Village Corridor Initiative, is to create a space that's accessible for all kinds of users, pedestrians, cyclists, as well as motorists. So downtown vision, big driver for the Village Corridor Initiative. Here's the geography. So the northern end is roughly the bridge by Upper Mass Landing Road. Downtown Village, again, sort of kind of the heart of the matter, and then extending south to the Breeze Stop at Maine Beer Company. This area represents geography that fits within a transit-oriented development framework. So Freeport's lucky to have a train station, multiple bus stops, and connectivity on Route 1 as well as 295. This geography leverages that and the infrastructure that's there to move the community forward. So great study area, just big enough but not too big. Upcoming milestones, this is our schedule for the rest of the initiative. Again, we're working with Maine DOT. Key partner here, Maine DOT is funding half of this study, so the town foots the bill for about half of it. Stantec is the consultant that's working with us. They were selected through a competitive RFP with really strong responses. So we're now at the sort of a pivot point where the analysis that's been done over the last several months is about to be brought forth to the broader community to understand what we've learned and then start to provide more targeted input about where we want to go based on that input. So we're here in December of 2025. You're going to start to see public involvement in January. I just mentioned we've got a workshop at FCS on the 14th in the evening, and then we're scheduled to have a second council workshop on the evening of February 3rd before the regularly scheduled council meeting to start to see what we've learned and start to translate that into designs and alternatives for the future. The idea is to have a draft report that's pretty well vetted and complete by June, and then to, depending on what we decide tonight, then to do some demonstration projects that further test some of the assumptions in those recommendations and either validate what we've learned and where we're going, or help us to make some tweaks to better fine-tune the community's vision for the future. And then we'll wrap this up by early fall in September, and that's good timing because Maine DOT starts to really prioritize work plans and funding for the next year or two. So by getting this done in September, we're going to be able to hand that off just like one runner on a relay race hands the baton to the next rate and stride. Next steps, 13th of January in the morning, Complete Streets Committee. Folks are welcome there. We meet at 7:30. I think we're going to talk about trying to make that a little bit more accessible, or at least have recordings so that the public has access to it. And we'll start to see some cross sections for the road and what that looks like in terms of how much real estate is allocated to multi-use paths, sidewalks, and then roadways, so we can see how we're balancing the uses up and down the corridor. The 14th workshop, FCS, I think it'll be very interesting in terms of the town's housing goals and how we revitalize the downtown. That land use workshop on the 14th will lend some insights and sort of chart a path towards the future. And then, as I mentioned, February 3rd, we're coming back here before the council meeting to have a discussion and hopefully start to dial in on next steps. So the vision, this came out again out of Downtown Vision in 2022. This sketch here, the larger image, came from July 2025 with an idea that the community would like to see a vibrant downtown, more space for pedestrians, as well as good vehicle flow down Main Street. And so that was a vision that was put forth. We tested that at Main and Bow over the fall. And we all know that it was a learning experience, but overall positive. The all-way stop did slow traffic down a little bit, but it did not degrade it significantly. So Maine DOT, the consultants felt like it was a good outcome that validated the assumptions going in. We did realize that there were some real design issues trying to do things quickly. You learn a lot, and thanks to Public Works, we were able to respond to some of those challenges. Earl was out there for the first few days on the regular, making adjustments to mitigate issues, learned a lot, and we're confident that going forward we can mitigate those issues in advance with future designs so large vehicles can make the turns. The pedestrian crosswalks are brought up to the intersection, which will make things flow a little bit smoother, help with the sight lines. And then we'll also, going forward, really commit and focus on making sure that the visual experience of travelers as they enter the intersection is a positive one, and we got some feedback on posts and kind of a construction zone feel that trial had that we'll hopefully be able to mitigate going forward. And then also the bus stops are critical. So we learned that the traffic flow from Bow to Maine, because of that stop sign, dramatically improved. Folks were able to get off of Bow onto Maine more smoothly and safely. And then last but not least, again, hats off to Earl and his team. Trials are hard. They take a lot of staff time and effort, and you learn a lot. So we're going to build on those learnings and hopefully have a smooth process depending on what we decide tonight. So to recap, we identified 3 options to go forward. One is a full demonstration project at Maine and Bow. Where we landed in the fall was really sort of a hybrid, quick build project, which really focused on one key data point, and that is, did an always stop work at Maine and Bow? What we didn't do was test some of the assumptions about expanding sidewalks, reclaiming some public space, and what that would mean for the pedestrian experience. So the full demonstration we'll get to in a minute, but it's a more robust build-out with barriers and other materials. The second option is School and Elm intersection, to do a 4-way stop there, as well as to adjust the timing of the Mallet Drive light to smooth traffic there at that end of the corridor. And then the third option, which we'll talk about, excuse me, is to have no further trial installations, but rather to proceed to high-res photo renderings and landscape architect sketches, where you can see what it would look like at its permanent change. So those are the 3 options. The full demonstration, again, convert to an all-way stop. We would use Jersey barriers to delineate the throughway, as well as to protect expanded public spaces. We would move the crosswalk from Bow Street up to the intersection from where it's at currently now, and we would add an intersection across essentially from Linda Bean's restaurant over to the headquarters. This is fairly complex, fairly intensive, with a fair amount of labor. We're talking about moving crosswalks. We're talking about installing Jersey barriers and a number of other things as well. And as a result, in addition to the roughly $15,000 of equipment, we would need to put this out to bid based on Public Works' other projects that they're prioritized on. So if we want to do this smoothly, the idea would be that it would be, a number of night shifts after a bid process. And there's some trade-offs and some risks associated with that. So that's the full implementation demonstration at Bow and Maine. The next one is the combination of a 4-way stop at School and Elm with the traffic light timing. School and Elm is broadly recognized in the community as a trouble spot. That's validated by Maine DOT's data, which considers it a high crash intersection. If you're around public meetings in town hall, you hear a lot of talk about traffic issues at School and Elm. So it's a well-known challenge. And the idea would be to make that an all-way stop, to eliminate the turning lanes. And then the upside to this, as opposed to the Maine and Bow trial, which I think informed the staff recommendation, is that at the end of the Maine and Bow trial, regardless if the community wanted to move forward with it, regardless if we wanted to make that permanent investment, it would have to be deconstructed and sort of put back to the way it looks now. So it would be a step back after we learned. School and Elm, because of its relative simplicity compared to Maine and Bow, it can become permanent. So a trial, if the community likes it, feels it's an improvement, with some additional tweaks and some additional upgrades, it could be made permanent. So that's pretty exciting. And then the idea at Mallet Drive would be to prioritize northbound traffic turning left onto Mallet. There's an assumption there that that's the majority of the traffic, and by forcing those folks to wait, you end up with a long queue that impacts everybody. That by prioritizing that left-hand turn during most times of the day, permanently we'd want a camera that would be able to count queues and adjust based on certain times. But by facilitating that northbound traffic to head left onto Mallet, The belief is that that will greatly reduce the amount of queues that build up from Mallet. And I can attest to my experience on the busy day of the Fall Fest, where the Main and Bow all-way stop was moving fairly smoothly, but traffic from Mallet was backed up all the way, if not to the intersection, to Justin's Way. So the idea here with School and Elm and Mallet is that we've got some learnings from Main and Bow. Let's push forward down that corridor and continue to test so that we smooth out some of those issues that, regardless of what happens further south, would back traffic up. So that's the idea. And then the traffic light, it's our light. We can control that. So we have some flexibility to be nimble with that. And that could become permanent, as well as an improvement at School and Elm. So an opportunity to address a pretty big issue area there. Next one, please. And then the third one, like I mentioned before, is really to say, we've learned a lot from Main and Bow. We can visualize what that looks and feels like, or at least how we experience it from a traffic standpoint. Now let's go and move past posts and Jersey barriers and have nice renderings that we can see that would show us what this would look like. So Tom, next slide. So this is an example of a high-res 3D photo rendering. And this is what we would recommend for the Bow and Main intersection. So you could truly see if the curbs were built out, if the crosswalks were moved, what kind of space that would create, how it could be activated, how that could add vibrancy and vitality to the downtown. So that's a photo rendering. The next option is a landscape architect sketch, where you can see, if you look closely, that below the sketch, there's a true life photo that then a landscape architect, to scale, sketches over what the improvements could look like. So it's a real good opportunity, less expensive than the 3D rendering, but it gives you a pretty good sense for some of those important areas in the corridor, what things would look like if permanent changes were made. We've talked about this a little bit with the Village Corridor Initiative leadership team. We talked about budget and priorities with Complete Streets Committee as well. And the idea would be that in order to do the demonstration projects and to do the high-res renderings and landscape architecture sketches, we would need an additional out-of-scope allocation of funding of roughly, depending on what the a la carte choice is tonight, it could total up to 20 grand. The good news is Maine DOT, as I mentioned earlier, is footing half the bill. So the town investment would be half of whatever we land on. But Complete Streets and the VCI, I think, our pretty leadership team are comfortable with this discussion and where we're heading. And look forward to the next recommendation here, which is essentially that we've learned a lot at Main and Bow. We see a lot of value collectively as a staff team with a lot of input, that the School and Elm intersection trial would address a well-known issue, allow us, if we like what we see, to convert it to a permanent change. And if you combine that with the Mallet Light traffic adjustment, there's a real opportunity to create some improvements and to build on what we learned in the fall, to learn something new in a new area. So action items to move option 2 forward is to commit an additional $10,000 to the consulting team. Again, that would equate to 5 from the town for design and engineering. And then it's important to note, too, that one of the key things we heard was a concern that if we slow Main Street down significantly, that we would have traffic on the side streets. And we want to make sure that we're thinking about that, and we're going to be proactive about being diligent. So we're going to work, hopefully, with PACS and GP-COG to do those traffic counts on the side streets, South Street, East Street, and others. But if we aren't able to secure that as part of our relationship, we want to make sure we have the resources to go out and hire a third-party vendor who can do that for us. So that's about $5 grand from the town, 10 grand from the total, including DOT. We would need to get approval from Maine DOT for these, in particular School and Elm. They've been a part of the process. Don't anticipate it would be a huge issue, but just want to make sure that you're aware that the next step would be to go ahead and put together a proposal for Maine DOT and start to mobilize in spring. And then we also think it makes a lot of sense to move forward with option 3. That Main and Bow, we've learned a lot, but we need to see what it would look like at full design. The community needs an opportunity to review that and wrestle with it and understand what it means. And so we're asking for an additional allocation for these renderings, as well as landscape architecture sketch of School and Elm. But also a little bit of extra resource for landscape architecture sketches at other points in the corridor. We don't know exactly where the most benefit would be for those sketches, but we anticipate that it could be the railroad bridge. There could be a desert road, intersection that we want to see what it would look like. So we want to make sure that we have enough resources if we need them. If we don't, we'll manage it carefully and we won't spend it. But for $5,000 to do that level of analysis and be able to show the community and have them have an image to understand what things will look like, it seems like a pretty good investment, even with the DOT footing half the bill. So those are the staff recommendations. We, like I said, we've thought a lot about this. We recognize that a trial at School and Elm is going to be a change for a lot of folks. So we've already started working with the communications director to think about how we get the word out about that, how we educate about what we're trying to accomplish, and to make sure that we're bringing folks along with what we're learning as we look to make decisions for the Route 1 corridor. So those are our staff recommendations, and I, with other members of the team, welcome any questions.
I really appreciate the level of detail and hard work to try to bring some good sense to a complex situation. With regard to the mallet traffic light, will the option experiment actually have a smart light, or will that just make things better if it works reasonably well and then we get a smart light later? Because
I think we'll push on that. The idea would be to do it as soon as we can. I think the trial to initially start would probably be without that. And I would anticipate that there would probably be, just like the bridges that we talked about, where DO takes a little time to dial these things in, that there would be some of that as well.
I mean, I think of a light as a replacement for a human being, which would always be better.
Mm-hmm.
Janice Fogg was out directing the buses. It was a great show, and she did a great job. So I think that notion of a smart light could make a huge difference. But I think they're not a cheap date, so thank you.
Could you talk a little bit more about option 3 and sort of like what is the goal of those 3D renderings and sketches? Is it to get design funding? Is it for the public to understand what we're trying to do? Like, what is the goal of those?
I think to the 2 points you just made, it's all the above. But Tom, if you go back to slide 2 or 3, the Jeff sketch, right there, thank you. What we're working on right now is sort of this level of detail, and folks who spend a lot of time thinking about this can see that the road's been narrowed. They can see that the crosswalk on Bow has been moved up. They can see that we maybe have some street trees and that there's expanded public space. But it's hard for a lot of folks, myself included, to understand what that would look like if I'm walking up Main Street northbound and I'm approaching it at street level. And so that ability to see with a high-res image what that would look like and feel like without posts, without temporary signs, with nice finishes and materials, would add a lot of value in understanding what that would look like and what the benefits would be.
That's helpful. I think I was thinking that we would be getting this for the whole corridor. So I'm like, option 3, I feel like we get that. We don't have to necessarily say, yes, we want that, because isn't that part of the project in general? Like, isn't that the outcome?
So the project would not have that level of rendering the whole way. You're going to have more sketches at key points.
With like general design for the whole corridor, and this would be like specific
Yep.
to the, yeah.
As well as cross-sections. So it's almost, if you're looking at the road, you would see how much space is allocated to certain users. But we're pretty confident that with that sort of spot level of detail combined with the bigger corridor, that you'll have a good feel for what the options are.
Just walking through the points, I appreciate the hesitancy to go forward with yet another demonstration at Main and Bow, even if the idea is that perhaps that still will be part of the final design. I think given all of the feedback that we received, we're very aware that we did not get much, if any, of the benefit of the final design in the test, simply because we couldn't activate that public space. We couldn't make it look visually like it would look in the final. And even with the more extensive potential test build-out, we still won't get that. It will still look like a construction zone. It still won't really be a finished open public space. So I think that there are real hindrances to doing another test that, while might be better, would still not really be the full implementation effect. Whereas I do think we're going to need a really detailed view of what that final piece would look like if that really goes forward and if we're going to approve that. I do think that the Elm School and Main intersection really is the next obvious thing to test. We certainly heard a lot of feedback about that, even for folks that were very unhappy about the Main and Bow test. Some of those same folks were really eager to have an all-way stop at Elm School and Main, and I think that really is, certainly we know that there's a lot of Main Street backup heading up to Mallet, particularly during school exchange times, particularly in the afternoon. But I still see that school to Main to Mallet jag as a really key throughway for folks really on the whole northeast corner of town who are getting to and from 295. And I think if we can help people get on and off of School Street with that four-way stop and get the Mallet intersection right, that I think that would be a big improvement. One thing you said, Brett, when you said that that's our light at Mallet and School, Mallet and Main, my understanding is that MDOT still controls the timing, though, of that they would have to be the ones that would be adjusting.
Yeah,
because it's still two state-controlled roads at that intersection.
That's a good clarification, and appreciate that. And some of the resources around the design, Stantec would need a little bit of time with their traffic engineers to dial in what that timing would look like, and DOT would need to approve it.
Earl, can you confirm that with that light?
We can increase.
I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. We should move that table somewhere else, or put a mic back there.
I sort of like hiding so I can pull that behind me if I say something. Yes, MDOT has guidelines that you have to follow. They have to be a certain second. You can increase that to 5 without their approval. So, but you can't go below, I think there's 1, 2, 3. Each one of those lanes have 15 seconds to it, so it's 45 seconds, and then you can't go below that, but you can add to it.
And so you can do the actual adjustment.
Well, we have to get somebody because it's a hardware that you hook up, but
He cannot have his hands in the
their
box.
name skips me, right? They've done it for me before. We've done Independence that way. And I would like to go ahead and say, yes, there is plans to change that to cameras. The hesitancy to do that right now is I need to get that path built so that when we do set it up, it's looking at everything. So if we set it in place now, we'd have to go back and change it once that's done.
Thank you, Brett, and to the whole team for all the work that's gone into it so far. It's great stuff. I can't wait for more to come. And I agree with what's been said and what we said at the last meeting about I would love to do a better test at Bowen, Maine. I don't want to do a worse test. I don't want to do an uglier test because I feel like the reactions we will get are reacting to the things that we're not as interested in getting feedback on, right? So I am interested in getting feedback on what would a better engineered intersection look like. I'm not interested in getting feedback on whether or not you like Jersey barriers, whether or not you're going to hang out and drink your coffee on a piece of pavement that is now free to do that on. And I want to just focus on the first couple of slides, the origin of the project, which was, you know, making our downtown more vibrant, fixing these tiny little sidewalks that aren't useful for a lot of things, creating spaces for public art, creating places where people can drink coffee and be in the street and places for them to sit. That's what we're trying to do. Nobody started out and said, we'd like to re-engineer how traffic flows on Main Street. That's a byproduct of the things that we really want to do. So driving it home to make it more concrete, when we go with option 2 and option 3, creating a sketch for an intersection is great because it gives people an idea of where it might go. Traffic would be more or less here, people would be more or less there, but of course there's room to change, and we want to throw some benches here, change the elevation here. That's not out of the ordinary from a sketch to a final design. When we get into 3D renderings, it has the connotation of like finality, like this is what it will look like. There is a bench here, there is a step here. So if we do that, and I'm not opposed to doing it, my only ask is let's not get the input only from the traffic engineer and say this is the 3D rendering that we're now going to publish, but also the guys like Jeff Speck and the folks who are thinking more about the placemaking and what does that newly reclaimed land really look like? Mm-hmm. Does it have 1 bench or 3? Does it have steps or ramps? So really put some thought into that, because I feel like if we don't do that now, 2 things might happen. One is it'll never get done. It'll just be like, oh, yeah, throw some brick sidewalks on and call it done, missing a big opportunity. And the other piece is that it will be harder to gather as much public support for an okay design as it would be for something that's beautiful and really well thought through. So I know we only have $5,000, I think, set aside for the 3D renderings, maybe $10,000 for the 3D renderings. But I want to make sure that we get those designers, those thought leaders involved in that process before we publish those designs.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I wanted to flag that on our recent project management call that we had on Monday morning with DOT and Stantec, that one of the key things that we want to bring to a public meeting in April or May is a Jeff Speck-like corridor sketch, so people get a sense of the feel and what that means. If you go back 1 slide, too. And then what I also want to reiterate, again, one more, that this is where we're at, right? We're going from sort of plans into a deeper design, but then from that vision and design, we then hopefully are linked up with DOT, not only from a planning partnership perspective, but also going out to access resources to build it. And at that point, then we get to final designs where we can really continue to fine-tune this, sorry about that, and then ultimately construction. So this is an important point on the process. We're going to make sure that we have the resources to do, Dan, what you just said, where folks have a chance to see what this will look and feel and mean. And from that, then, we hope to work with DOT and other partners to raise the money so that the town's TIF dollars that you all recently passed will be leveraged with regional and state dollars and federal dollars as well.
One more small ask is when we do the test at school in Elm and Maine and Mallet, one of the things that I heard a few times from the last test at Boa, Maine, is that there wasn't really an official public forum. So I was encouraging people, you could tell me your feedback, you can give Brett your feedback. There were a lot of informal ways, but there wasn't like, this is the meeting to come to, or this is the email to go to, or the website form to fill in. So if we could create some kind of momentum around a method for people to submit feedback, I think they'll feel better about being able to weigh in.
That's great. There is a survey, and my understanding is that it's a survey, not, how do you feel, what do you want to see, but it's more how, do you like this, do you like this, do you like this? And I hope we move the process forward over the next month so that when we come back on February 3rd with the workshop with Complete Streets, we're starting to really get pretty dialed in on what that's going to look like. And I'm hopeful that at that point we'll have a design and even a sketch for Elm in school. So we start to get really serious about what our options are.
Thanks.
Brett, just following up on that, if you go back to the slide that is the timeline, in terms of the public engagement line, there's, you've got a meeting and then a survey and then a meeting. And I didn't know if you wanted to elaborate on what the plans are for those public meetings.
I think it's a little bit to be determined, but if we follow that logic that we just discussed, we're in December, so January, we'll have the workshop. We have, part of what we're going to show on January 14th is a draft coordinated development plan. So that one of the big goals of marrying the land use with the transportation planning is that by understanding what potential development we can see, we can plan the transportation system to serve that. And with the primary goal of being able to absorb a fair amount of development that the community would like to see without adding to congestion. So that's a big part of the coordinated development plan that we'll be rolling out pretty soon. And then we start to get into transportation alternatives. So March, you see the third line from the bottom, transportation alternatives. That's when we're starting to see the corridor designs and how we're going to manage the traffic and what the various points along the corridor are going to start to look like. And that's, that if you go jump back up to the blue line, then you've got sort of an opportunity for the public to weigh in with a survey and then come back together and talk about what we learned. With an idea that at that point, we're really starting to dial into what the final recommendations are that we would then validate with trials and further experience over the summer. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think it's just helpful to see where that plays out in relation to this trial, because I think April is right about when Earl's going to be going out to paint whatever that intersection is. So it would be a key opportunity to explain and get feedback on what the trial's going to be.
Yeah, great point.
Is there any, with any of the data we collected from Bowen, Maine, and any data we may collect if we do the School and Elm intersection, is that going to inform any changes to crosswalks within the downtown on Main? And if it isn't, is that going to be a problem at some point if we're not assessing that?
Yes, if I'm understanding your question correctly, it sounds like we have to accommodate changes in what that means up and down the corridor. So for example, if we were to do a trial at Main and Bow again as a hypothetical, that would involve adding a crosswalk across from Linda Beans over to the flagship. We probably wouldn't need one 100 feet further south at Boat Bike and Ski. So we would start to accommodate those changes up and down to make sure that the corridor's flowing as a whole, and that we're not continuing to stop. We're sort of directing people into a few points that make a lot of sense and not having crosswalks up and down the corridor and stopping traffic intermittently every 50 feet. So yes, that's a long way of saying that this will result in a corridor that works together as a whole.
Great, thanks.
So I know you're looking for, or we're going to vote on a formal recommendation for the summer of what we'll pursue. The motion that is in the agenda right now is the staff recommendation of pursuing 2 and 3. So that would be the School, Elm, and Main, and also the photo renderings and landscape designs. I agree with that recommendation, but welcome discussion if folks would like to discuss otherwise.
Is there a motion on the floor?
No, not yet. That's what we're trying to figure out.
Okay.
No, it's just the language is, specific as to the staff recommendation, but we can certainly adjust that if we so choose. But I support the motion as it stands. So,
As I do.
all right. Councilor Lawrence, I think it's your turn.
Okay. Be it ordered that the town manager be directed to work with staff, stakeholders, and consultants to implement VC1 demonstration projects, options 2 and 3 for summer 2026.
Second.
Yeah, Councilor Smith. Or Pilch. Any further discussion or questions? All right, all those in favor? Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was very helpful and thorough. All right, moving on to the next item, which is to adopt our 2026 Town Council meeting schedule. So folks should have that as proposed. I do want to just acknowledge that it looks like a lot.
Because it is.
It is. But I do want to just remind folks that Sophie and Chris had the, I think, great idea to put a monthly placeholder. So that right there is 11 dates that we have holds on for workshops if we so choose. So is there any discussion on the calendar?
What are we going to do about district meetings?
So for the calendar as presented, it's just holding the dates for district meetings in September. It would allow you some time to figure out how you want to manage that.
So there's, I see,
September 10th and...
Is August 17th.
the 17th of August, the 26th of August,
29th.
September 10th, and September 29th. Yeah. And I did compare it to 2025, and it's, aside from the holds for workshop, it's pretty similar, so.
There is a new date that we did sneak in here on February 10th, but it came out of what we heard in discussion, which was the idea of council having dinner with the committee chairs prior to the committee council workshops. That is not a given. That's not something that you decided for sure you wanted to do. It was just, it came up in conversation.
And additionally, we did recognize that we might not need all of our board and committee workshop dates, so.
I'm sure we'll figure out a way to use all those.
My suggestion might be that we use some of our conversation time during the January 27th goal-setting workshop to solidify plans around these additional sort of outreach meetings, whether they're the district meetings or the council chair dinner, just so we are all on the same page about what we want to use that time for in those settings. I'm in support of the schedule in general as it's laid out, although I will say that given our conversation about 4 district meetings or 2 district meetings, the fact that right now 2 of them are in August makes me lean towards 2 district meetings.
Yeah.
Because I don't think that those are going to be necessarily well attended in August.
And I do, I think we decided that we'll keep the 4 on for now.
Yeah.
And as it gets closer and we think through it more, we can make a decision.
If we're solidifying, we're picking the dates, would it make sense to move the 2 August district meeting dates to October to address that issue? So if we do wind up having the 4, at least they're not over the summer. We could still decide to have 2 later, but if we do have 4, at least they're better dates.
Yeah,
So the 13th
right.
is open, and I don't know what the next one would be. I guess it would have to be, I don't know.
We could at least move 1 to October 13th.
Yeah, move the August 17th one.
Yeah, the early August one. I agree with that.
So changing August 17th to October 13th.
Yeah.
That's a Tuesday.
That would be a Tuesday, yeah.
I just want to make sure we're staying away from holidays.
All right. Any other thoughts, discussion?
Oh, we'll have plenty of time. There's no excuse for not getting work done.
We'll try to only hold workshops when we really need them.
That was more about planning.
Yeah. And I think it's a good call. It saves a little bit of a headache for Chris to, try and track down 7 people's very busy schedules. All right, so any other thoughts before we move to the vote? Okay, so we'll say as amended because we did change a date. So, Councillor Brown, would you please read the be it ordered and then add the as amended?
Sure. Be it ordered that the 2026 Town Council meeting schedule be adopted as amended.
Second.
All right, all those in favor? Aye. All right, you signed up for it. Everybody voted yes. All right, moving on to our committee and liaison assignments. I think you'll see not too much has changed, a few adjustments here or there. I tried to keep most folks on consistent committees and or their top choices, so. Any discussion, feedback? And Councillor Sparta, the original idea was that we would both be on FEDC, but you're still on the board, I believe, correct?
I don't have to be, but.
I think you can sit in the board still, if you so choose. It's up to you.
I would love to.
Okay, perfect.
That work very much.
So that way you'll be there for your business hat. I'll be there for council. So, great. Any thoughts? All right, Councillor Pilch.
Be it ordered that the assignments for the 2025-2026 Town Council Committee and liaison positions be made as discussed.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, and our final voting item for the night. So this is to consider action for the Harb Cottage fees at Winslow Park. Councillor Pillsbury.
So our last Winslow Park meeting, we had a discussion, we're beginning discussions around fee schedule for the park, being mindful of the budget implications in terms of revenue versus expense. Things are getting more expensive. We've maintained the park at an excellent value for both internal residents of Freeport and external visitors. But I do think it's time, and the committee agreed, to revisit rates. And the one we're going to start with first is Harp Cottage, because that's a lottery system to rent it out. And we went through the lottery process at the last meeting to select all the dates. And as part of that, we need to send out invoices. So we need to set the fee. The fee has been a tremendous deal. Traditionally, it's been separated into high season and low season, but that really runs end of May through middle to end of September. And we feel like one of the considerations was that that's really all high season, if you think about it. So we're getting rid of high and low season. We're setting one rate. The recommendation is $2,200 a week. So that will raise for the high season from $1,900 to $2,200 and $1,500 in the low season to $2,200 a week. It's still an affordable deal. It still compares reasonably well with other properties of similar size, amenity. This is likely going to be the first raise of rates, and we'll probably revisit a secondary increase for next year. But this is the step the committee recommended we make. And this will help close sort of the budget gap in terms of expense and revenue for Harp Cottage only.
Is this for this season?
Yep.
Do you think that will impact anybody's desire to fulfill their lottery winning?
So just so you're aware, when people came onto the landing page of the website to sign up for the Harb Cottage lottery, there was a statement there that said fees were under consideration. And so it was very clear that it wasn't going to be the same as this year.
And then if somebody were to drop out, would you just pull another name from the lottery, or?
There are 10 additional names that have already been drawn from the lottery as a wait list.
Okay.
There were 255 applicants for the 18 weeks. So, and most folks said, I'll take any week that's available. So I think the demand is robust.
Yeah, that sounds good. And then, so when you were, the commission conversation, was anybody opposed, or was it fairly unanimous?
No.
Yeah. Great. Any other questions? All right, Counselor Smith.
Be it ordered that the fee to rent Harb Cottage be set at $2,200 per week for short-term rentals in the summer season.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, moving on to the public comment period, part 2 for folks who are virtual. Okay. And then moving on to other business, we are revisiting the conversation around our process for allocating funds to outside agencies, as we've been kind of trying to figure out for a little while now. So, Councilor Pillsbury, back to you.
Sure. So our estimated time of ending the meeting is 50 minutes from now, so I'll speak at length. So, no, this is a follow-up from the last time. We prefaced this agenda item a few meetings ago. The Finance Committee went through the process of allocating the fiscal $26 for outside agency support. And as part of the process, when Dan and Joanna and I went through it, we made recommendations and we brought it back to the council. But in looking at it, we realized that we need to have a little bit more discussion around how we support outside agencies and what the right mechanism, because if you remember this year, what we did is we agreed on a fixed amount per the budget and then left it to the Finance Committee to just make those determinations. But there's a lot of like apples to orange comparisons. And so we just want to take another turn at it and talk about the best way for us to do that, to make sure we're supporting the services that are vital and instrumental in supporting our town and our town residents. Because there are a lot of services that the town doesn't provide, but are of incredible value to residents. There's some that agencies that look for support that are vital to the visioning process and sort of the what our residents have said are ideals that the town should uphold, like the arts. But they're all it's kind of a mix, and so we just don't know if the way we did the process this year is dialed in. Is that the best way for us to do it? So that's it in a nutshell. So it's really meant to be a discussion around how we approach this as we start to gear up for fiscal 27 budget discussions.
Okay. I'm all for supporting outside agencies. However, I do have a problem with supporting them as a budget item on our normal budget, because there are people that can't pay their taxes here, and it is not a choice. You can lose your house if you don't pay taxes. And if I have to choose between donating to this organization and eating, I'm going to take eating every single time. Well, maybe not every single time, but it's a choice. Whereas when we donate, it's not a choice. Everybody's donating to that. It doesn't matter if it's $3 or $100. It still hurts the people that are at the bottom of the scale. So I think in appropriating these funds, it should be after the fact. In other words, we do our tax collection, all that, and when we go to support the capital budget with the excess, that's where this money should come out of. That way, we're not raising taxes to do those particular entities.
I'm trying to remember how we came to our budget amount last year, because it was a unique amount.
So last year, we took what we had historically expended on what used to be, so let me give a little bit of history here. As I understand it, there was a time when the allocations for outside agencies were for social service. They were, and once somebody there was an allocation long ago, and if somebody dropped out, then you'd consider somebody to fill in, but it wasn't necessarily this very open process. And then my understanding is when ARPA came along, then it kind of opened up for some additional types of funding. And then the year I got here, we went through the whole budget process without a lot of debate. I would say discussion, but not a ton of debate, and then spent a significant amount of time on those budget allocations. So when I talk with the finance, so that's when we came back and said, can we just allocate the money and then figure out how much you want to spend on it through the budget process, and then figure out how you want to spend it after the fact. In talking with the finance director, who I think she's celebrating 10 years with us, somewhere in that neighborhood, she sees a pretty significant shift from clear kind of social service to the vision support, I would say, for lack of a better term. What we've heard since then, because there have been more conversations, is kind of like, we have some things that are in the budget that are outside agencies. We have FEDC, which I know there is frustration of an organization trying to plan having to come every year. And I know that there was some frustration on the committee's part of, we're trying to make budget decisions with organizations that maybe have already planned on that money. So I think it was this conversation of how can we dial this in so that we're doing what we want with that money, and that also we can give enough notice to people to be able to plan and not create uncertainty with valuable partners, whether they be social service partners, economic partners, or vision partners. Have I summed it up? Okay.
I think part of the confusion about this is the way that we've come to talk about it as outside agencies and what that even means. Because I completely understand Councilor Lawrence's point. If we're thinking about all of these organizations that we're talking about as essentially charities, as something that we have an option to give, and it's an extra thing that is nice to have but not essential. And I think the issue is that what we're calling outside agencies in this context are simply anything that's a nonprofit, regardless of what services they are providing. And some of the services that they are providing are essential services. Some of them, may or may not be. But talking about outside agencies, I mean, we pay hundreds of outside agencies that are just not nonprofits. We pay, in these warrants, all kinds of external organizations. The difference is we don't see those as optional. We don't see those services as optional. They are integral services that the town needs to provide, and so we are paying for them because that's our responsibility. And we are making a decision on behalf of the town of the level of service that our residents receive for the taxes that they pay. So I think it is problematic to just say everything that is a nonprofit is therefore optional regardless of what the services are that they provide. Because I think what we really need to be talking about is, are the services things that the town should be paying for or not, regardless of whether who we're paying for that service is a nonprofit or a for-profit entity. Because it is true that we started off when we started using this term agency, it was because they were all social service agencies. And that's not really what we're talking about when we're talking about all of the nonprofit folks. And I think, so we have everything from things that are truly optional, where we get simply a request from someone that may or may not provide direct services to Freeport residents. We also have nonprofits that have contractual obligations to that we don't have choices about. And then we have organizations like FEDC that we fund completely in whole through town funds. So it really runs the gamut. And I think I question why it is that we are boxing everything into this category simply because it's a nonprofit agency.
I think it gets complicated because some of the agencies, I'm looking at the list here, that, as an example, they'll provide free medical service, which allows us to have a place to refer people to. They will still provide that whether or not we donate to their cause. So their request is not so much an invoice for services or a contract. It's, we do this for many of the towns in the area. Can you help out by making a donation since we're helping your residents? So I agree with what you said in spirit, and I think it's hard to do in practice for this particular group of agencies.
Well, and I think that's kind of the point, is that there are certain organizations that are going to do what they do regardless of whether we pay them money. But it is then a question, too, about are they services that if that organization went away, that would then fall back on the town as something that is, in fact, the town's obligation. And so are we getting the efficiency of actually paying much less by supporting this organization than what we would be bearing if it actually all fell back on the town?
Yeah. So to that point, one of the things that we had put in place as part of the application process was the application, you had to describe the organization, the amount of funding previously received, the level of service provided, and the value, and like you had to quantify the impact to Freeport. So we were conscious around the return of investment of funds. Like if we donated $1,500 to one of the organizations and they provided $15,000 worth of care and treatment to Freeport residents, that seems like a good use of money, because we wouldn't be able to spend $1,500 and treat $15,000 worth of, dental or medical care. So we were working in that direction because, it's a really valid point. Like, we have to assess the impact of these funds, just like we would paying for a contract for, like, road salt, But again, it doesn't move the conversation further in terms of, how we split these up and what we call them. But that is part, just for the public's point of view, that is part of the process that we put in place.
I don't want to lose track that there are also agencies that are in the budget and called out in the budget. Chamber, the Historical Society, FEDC was put in the budget. So I think however we kind of slice this, and maybe the answer isn't that it's a one-size-fits-all answer. And the other piece that I don't know how you quantify, but is the partnership, right, with the town. That if we're working on a 3-year project or a 4-year project, or it gets hard when it is annual kind of funding. And so are there different mechanisms? Is there a way to parse out kind of different buckets for how we're going to treat different organizations?
Well, in addition to what you asked, I think if we're going to do that. It shouldn't be a revolving door where, oh, he got it this year, they got it next year, they got it the year ad infinitum. At some point, a nonprofit's got to kind of stand on its own or go away. And if the town is supporting it, then, and the town's folks aren't supporting it, why are we supporting it? You know what I mean? It's, a business has to stand on its own, and a nonprofit is a business that should be standing on its own. It just has a protection that it doesn't have to pay taxes, right? And if it's not paying taxes, we don't get a benefit from that, and we're paying more money to them. So that, you know, everything you've said has been valid, but it's another tax on people that is already being.
I understand your point. I guess I'm questioning when you say it has to stand on its own. I mean, any nonprofit has a whole host of funding sources. Some of that's going to be individual. A lot of nonprofits get a lot of money from the government at all levels, whether it's local, state, federal. And some nonprofits get funds from businesses as well as individuals. But I think it really depends. I don't think you can, it kind of goes back to grouping them all together as certain agencies, because they're cooperative within a region, actually do rely, I mean, part of their whole structure is to get some money from multiple towns, as well as some private funds. I do think that there is some validity to, again, if we're able to identify particularly some of those regional partners that are not entirely dependent on Freeport, their catchment includes Freeport, that perhaps the variability of what we're able to give them may come out of surplus, so that those are set aside as that. But I don't know how to parse those out. I mean, I think that's where we come down to is this whole conversation about what is the policy about how we fund and how we make those determinations in terms of which organizations do we support. Because I feel like every time it's this subjective conversation about, is this agency worth funding this particular year or not?
And I mean, just to, as a point of clarification for everyone in the public, I mean, we're talking about a very small portion of our budget. I think the total allocation was $57,000 out of our entire municipal budget. So, and part of that was even contractual. So it's an even smaller fraction. So it's not as though we're talking a significant, we still have to be very mindful, but it's not a significant portion of our budget. And I would argue the return is multiple X the amount that we distributed.
So I suppose every time we have this conversation, we always get to this point where we talk about sort of like the big picture values, and this is where we get stuck. So, you know, I'm stumped. And so I think the question I have is, what do we need in order to feel like we can make a policy decision here? Or is it we go through the same process we did this last year, and it was better than the year before, so we keep doing it?
I mean, one easy-ish thing might be to pull out all the contractual agreements and not have that included as part of this pool of money.
So can you explain contractual agreements? Because when I look at the 57,000.
Was it not the piece of FCS?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, that was only the discretionary piece.
Sorry, I misspoke on that one.
So one other point, and I think where I get frustrated with this conversation, the way it keeps coming back, is this is the only part of the budget where we don't get a direct staff recommendation. And that's where I think, no, I understand that part of that comes from this idea of like, these are somehow optional funds. But I think part of why we struggle so much is we have recommendations from department heads about what they think their priorities are and how their funds should be spent. And if we have the police department saying, these are the organizations that we refer people to, that we rely on having these resources, and we think that it's important enough for that agency to be funded at X amount in our budget, because that is a part of how we operate in terms of particularly alternative response, is we need to know that this shelter is available, we need to know that this referral agency is available, that would seem to be where I feel like that's where we're not getting that direct staff input. And if we do have organizations that are coming to us that we think might be really important causes, but they don't have a clear place in what town services are already prioritized, then I think that goes back into that category of, well, if we don't have a town department that's saying this is an essential service, then I think that gives us important information. And if we do have a town department that says this is an essential service, that gives us other information.
So I'm just gonna, since you talked about town departments and staff making recommendations, I'm gonna just say that when you look at, I come up with almost $130,000 of support for agencies that are not coming out of operations. How can I say that? Like police department, fire department. And I think you could add another 3,000 to that, because out of the police department, based on an initiative, a joint partnership trying to test, quite honestly, whether Tedford House would be able to better support our needs. There was a $3,000 PD gave some assistance there. But when I look at the social service allocation of, is through these, do we make referrals to through these doors, or Oasis Clinic, or Sweetser, or, you know, things like that, I think through our alternative response, I could get you information about how we use those services. And I think I would be very happy to do that. I could sit and make arguments with Chip on this shoulder, and I'm going to just say Ken on this shoulder, about the chamber and FEDC in terms of, and Meeting House Arts, quite honestly, around the downtown vision. We have arrangements kind of where those are funded through the budget. It is really hard for me to say staff is going to recommend, I'll just call out FEDC or Meeting House Arts. Those are two very clear ones that when you talk about getting to the vision, they seem to be pretty important partners. When you talk about direct operations in terms of the departments that we are required to move forward, and the work plans I've talked about with council for those departments, they're not direct. I can't say this is a contract I need to be able to do the things that council has asked me to do. However, every time we've talked about FEDC, the one thing we continue to acknowledge is the marketing. There's too much for just Brett, who left, but there's too much for him to do. So we've split economic development, and we've said this is what the town can do. And in saying, we're not going to fund FEDC, I think what you're saying is we're not going to ensure that this body of work gets done. That does not seem like a staff recommendation. That seems like a council decision to me. And it would be a really political decision and not one I would be comfortable weighing in on beyond how staff links with either of those two organizations or the Historical Society. I mean, that to me gets really sticky. And I realize that you don't get paid the big bucks, but you're my bosses, I'll do whatever you say, but I feel like that's very much a council decision.
I do think that data would be helpful, like information of how, like, are there referrals being made? Are we using those services? That would be helpful.
I can absolutely do that.
Yeah. Councilor Lawrence?
And since you brought up FCF, we're already paying them a lot of money, and then we give them more. And they were set up, I guess, that way, that we have this huge contract with them that gets bigger every year, and then there's a budget item that's coming up that we're going to have to do, pave the parking lot. So the town, I don't know what the town gets out of that, right? And then we give them more money because, I don't know.
Wait a second. Are you saying you don't get the value that FCS brings to the town?
I get the value, but we're already paying them $56,000, and it keeps going up every year.
So-
And then we give them another, what we give them this year, 23,000, something like that? And then we're going to be paying pave the parking lot. So we have all these expenses that we don't use as a
Right, you
town.
might not use them.
I'm not talking about towns, folks. I'm talking the town administration, right? We have a space down there that we're supposed to be able to store stuff. We have a conference room that we don't use that we're supposed to be able to use. Instead, we go to another organization to do that. And so we're spending money here and we're spending money there for essentially the same type of services.
So maybe we need to review attributions and come up with a different plan, but
And I will say that was something that was considered when we were looking at how we allocated those more discretionary.
Don't we use a space? Doesn't Glenn use a space?
So Glenn's office, we pay $2,400 a year, I think, for Glenn's office. We do use the storage space. It's pretty packed, legally, of course, only
Fire standards.
only to fire standards. So one of the issues when I think FCS was just starting out, there wasn't a ton of call for space. And now they've got all sorts of programs and services. So when we call, usually we don't have a ton of notice. The meeting on January 14th, we had 2 months' notice so that we could we could get into their rotation. That is not a knock on them. They're doing great things in the community. If there's an empty space, we get second call on that space. But we have to go all over the place, Chip, because we're super busy, and in order to have a space bigger than this, we really are now trying to dovetail in with lots of different spaces that have lots of activity.
Well, I appreciate Eric's attempt to make this staff problem. But I like the outcome, though. I appreciate Sophie pushing back. It's very reasonable. But I do think, to Joanna's point, we're missing that data piece as to the utilization. We get the data from the organization that says we've supported X number of residents for this dollar amount. But to hear it from our GA administrator and our alternative response team and our police department saying these are the critical organizations that we partner with and refer folks and move our folks in town when they're in crisis or need support. This is where we partner with. like, that's a important missing piece, and I think that that would be helpful to the Finance Committee as we're reviewing applications for this upcoming year. I think that moves the needle of this discussion a little bit. I think that we should take a look at sort of the other sort of items that are more standing items or contractual, and just make sure we have a good sense of where those fit in the budget. And we can have a broader discussion around the vision that the residents of this town want us to put in place, and how we use dollars to support that. But maybe that helps further the conversation a little bit. I mean, it was naive to think we were going to solve it in one fell swoop tonight, but making progress is making progress.
So is that a conversation with the data, the information? Do you think that should go to Finance Committee, back to council? What do you think?
I actually think it should go to special projects. No, I think Finance Committee is fine. I think until we find, I couldn't resist, I'm sorry. But I think until we find, that would be my recommendation.
Okay.
But I'm
I
open
agree
to
with
other
that.
suggestions.
Yeah. I agree, at least for, to give the time and the space for a larger conversation. And of course, any counselor would be very welcome to join the three of us in that meeting. And that's the 22nd is our next one of January.
I don't know if I'll be able to have the data pulled together based on vacation schedule and for the 22nd. If not the 22nd, it would be February.
Which I think still gives us enough time.
But again, it's a discussion at the committee level to bring a recommendation back for our discussion and approval.
Yeah.
So, folks can come to participate at the committee meeting, or just, we'll bring the data back and have the discussion again here, so.
Okay.
We've got another 19 minutes to fill, so I'll offer some comments that I'll probably offer again when we talk about it at finance. But, there's a saying that says, if you show me your budget, I'll tell you what your values are. And I think this very much matches that. Much of our budget is discretionary. We don't have to have an economic development department. We could get rid of it, right? It's a good idea to have one, and I'm not saying we should do that. It seems like we allocate 99.6% of our budget in ways that are, I don't want to say routine, because we scrutinize everything every year, but there are things that fall into this extra 0.5% that we're not quite sure about. And how important are they to the town? So in a sense, like Sophie's saying, this is kind of where we're earning our measly dollars, about saying, well, what are the values, and how important is this? How important is it to redesign Main Street? I mean, that's a discretionary project that we've opted to do. So I guess what I'm saying is there are no easy answers. It is a value judgment, and it is something that I think we should recognize, like, by spending this money, we are adding to the tax bill, and is it worth it to do that? And I think the three of us in finance can make a recommendation that might help speed the discussion, but ultimately that's, it's something that all 7 of us need to weigh in on and be comfortable with, or vote against and say, like, yeah, this is important enough to me that I think we should do this, and it's worth the cost, the literal cost of doing it.
I think that was well said.
Thank you. We got another 17 minutes if anybody else wants to weigh in.
Filibuster.
Make a motion to adjourn?
Too early.
No, it's not.
Second.
We've been running late lately, so this is all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All right.